Hey guys, Shot the Monkey here. So it's been a week since you saw this aircraft first appear in a video on my channel, and since then I've kind of figured the aircraft out well enough that I think I could do a review of it. Um, this time though, when it comes to reviews, I'm going to do them a bit differently than I normally would. Normally I would just talk about the aircraft and then show you gameplay footage afterwards. This time what I'm going to do, just to see if it gets a bit of a better response than my previous videos, is talk about the aircraft and then show bits of gameplay footage related to the points that I'm making along the way. So, review of the IL-1. I'd call this thing a heavy fighter, but with the heavy coming in inverted commas. It's not a heavy fighter as the same way that heavy fighters in this game are listed, like the BF-110, the ME-410, Beaufighters, Meteors, anything like that. I'm not even sure if the Meteors is a heavy fighter now. I may have made that mistake as well. But yeah, it's not a heavy fighter in terms of how they're listed in the game. This thing just feels like a fighter that's got a bit of a weight problem. You are still flying a massive aircraft compared to other equivalent fighters of similar tier, for example, like the aircraft that you see lined up here compared to the Hurricane and the P-40. This thing is deceptively big compared to them. It still feels just as sluggish and as slow as the IL-2 that it's based off of. In terms of the roll rate isn't brilliant, the turning speed isn't that brilliant, it doesn't have a whole lot of top speed performance, the acceleration without boost isn't that great. Of course the weight is nice to have in a dive, because you'll accelerate up to kind of maximum dive speed pretty quickly, even some shallow dives if they're, not even if they don't have to be that long, you'll still get some nice acceleration out of it. And it also suffers from the same poor altitude performance that its ground attack aircraft equivalent does. This thing struggles above even heights as like 1,000 meters in altitude. This thing will start to underperform, and shortly after that you'll run into stalls even if you try and shallow climb without any boost on being used at the time. But I'll break everything down for you in terms of the review now. First thing we're going to talk about gun armament. You have two of them. They are 23mm cannons, the ones that you see on the IL at tier 5, and they're mounted in the wings, I think the same place they are mounted on the ground attack aircraft. These are very nice guns to have. Very long trigger time. It takes quite a while for them to overheat. They do nice damage when they hit. They're not amazingly accurate, but they're not inconsistent either. These aren't suffering from the same kind of terrible accuracy that you see from the 37mm guns, 45mm guns, and other large caliber weapons that the Russians have on the Yak line, those kind of weapons. They are quite similar to the German 20mm, in fact. Maybe slightly more accurate to compensate for the fact you have less kind of backup firepower on this aircraft than you do against other aircraft, but I'm not sure, I don't have the numbers on that. So yeah, reasonable damage, reasonable accuracy, very long trigger time, takes a long time to overheat them. So the guns are nice. The bombs, nothing noteworthy, only two of them, they're just kind of supplementary weapons in a way. Don't expect to be killing a whole lot of ground targets with these, but between the guns and the bombs you can do reasonable ground target work, but again you're not as good as you were if you were flying an IL-2, but you are better off against ground targets than other fighter aircraft that you might have at the same tier. Survivability, nice chunk of hit points with this aircraft. As you can see, very nice resistance to fire and very nice resistance to damage on stock without adding the extra bonuses from the camouflage. This aircraft is certainly quite tanky, and that's one trait that you really kind of notice with this aircraft from the IL-2 heritage. There's a whole lot of hit points to it, there is a whole lot of weight to the aircraft, and you do have good resistance to critical damage and fire, which is very nice to have. Also, I've noticed with this aircraft, it seems to be very good with regards to ramming. If another aircraft collides with you or chooses to ram you, if you're on similar hit points, either both of you will die or both of you will survive. It's usually that way. If an aircraft like the British Spitfire or the Japanese A6M collides with you, 9 times out of 10 you'll survive the collision and it'll finish them off because they have so little health and because those aircraft are so comparatively lightweight to you. The only time I've ever seen this thing really lose out in a ramming collision is with either another heavy fighter or with ground attack aircraft. Although in most cases you won't ever ram a ground attack aircraft because you're performing around the same kind of speed that they are, so you can quite reasonably sit behind their tail and just fill them with 23mm cannon ammunition. So that's one thing to keep in mind. Airspeed, you're slow. The only way you're ever going to really catch aircraft is if they come down to your altitude or they're in a turning engagement, or if you've got a nice amount of boost. Even if they're in just a shallow turn, you can get them that way. The acceleration, like I said, is pretty nice, but there isn't a whole lot in terms of top speed. There isn't a whole lot in terms of climb rate either. So there are aircraft that will happily outclimb you and happily outdive you, but you've got very good mid to mid-high range performance. Anything up to about 400 kilometers an hour, I think, is pretty solid with this aircraft. As you can see, boost speed is 555, maximum dive speed 650, cruise speed of 357, I'd say is about right, but like I said, this thing happily goes up to anywhere about 450, and you still perform just as well as you would, at least in terms of how I felt, as you would at the cruising speed. Manoeuvrability, score of 60 isn't that bad, but don't let it deceive you, this doesn't handle like a fighter. As you can see, your rate of roll is 100 degrees a second, which isn't bad, but it isn't brilliant. Minimum optimal speed of 180. This is a heavy aircraft. It will stall quickly. You will notice that when you're playing it, especially if you start having to be forced into climbing to higher altitudes. As you see there, stall speed is 120. Maximum optimal speed of 396. Again, if you push this thing up to 400, 450, it still feels pretty nice. The turn time at 10.8 isn't bad, but it isn't brilliant either. And then last but not least, altitude performance. Minimum optimal altitude of 0, maximum optimal altitude of 800, service ceiling of 1800 metres. I have yet to see my aircraft get there, and unless you have unlimited boost active, I don't think you ever will get there. I think that's just a completely false number, because I have yet to see my aircraft get even close to that. When this thing starts pushing about 1200 metres, it stalls incredibly quickly, so I don't even know if it would ever get to 1800 metres. You know, your mileage may vary compared to mine. Rate of climb is 100 metres a second. Not bad, again, not brilliant. Final thoughts on this aircraft. It's very specific to one role. This is an aircraft that is very good at supporting other aircraft, and it's very good at being a background character. If this thing gets focused on by enemy fighters, you've got no chance. 9 times out of 10 they'll take you out, no questions asked. You're very good at taking out guys that are either distracted or are already in a kind of like a defensive flying mindset, and therefore don't have the capability to come after you. It's also very good in 1 versus 1s, but again, you kind of have to finish most aircraft off either in a head-on or with a collision, or just hope that they are critically damaged on the tail or wings and can't fix it, and therefore that drop in mobility on their side allows you to outmaneuver them. But in terms of if anything gets onto you that, you know, even Corsairs, for example, can still turn pretty well with you, even out-turn you depending again on altitude, performance, relative airspeed of the 2 aircraft, etc, etc. So this is going to be one of those aircraft that I think for most people playing this game, it's not going to be something that they enjoy. But if you are the kind of person that likes being able to just put down consistent firepower and just bully people that aren't paying attention to you or that are already occupied with teammates and helping teammates out, and really you can do quite a lot of damage to this when the guns are on target. So if you don't mind the downsides of that, if you are going to get something on your tail, it will kill you, and you don't mind being shot down quite regularly if your team is just collapsing around you, then this might be an aircraft that you enjoy. For me, as much as I hate the way that it just can't deal with anything, any kind of focus tension on itself, I have enjoyed flying the IL-1, and it is an aircraft that I'm glad I picked up, and I will probably continue to enjoy flying it during the Blades of Vengeance event that's currently ongoing. So yeah, this is going to be a very much a Marmite aircraft. You're either going to desperately want to add it to your collection, or you're going to make like Iron Maiden and run to the hills. And I imagine for most of you, you will be running to the hills from this aircraft, because it's just not anywhere near as competitive as other Tier 6 premium aircraft in terms of fighters, multi-role fighters. So yeah, there we go, guys. I hope you've enjoyed this review in a different style. And I would like to thank you all very much for watching. I hope you've enjoyed the video, and I will see you all next time.